Hey there, indie authors. This is Michelle Rayburn, the host of Indie Author Blueprint, and I want to welcome you back today. If this is your first time listening to an episode, this one will have a little more inspiration for your writing and publishing journey, but I've been publishing lots of episodes on the practical tips where we talk about strategies for self-publishing. I've given you some of the resources for the how-to, so definitely go back on Substack and look at the other Indie Author Blueprint content if this is your first time here. Today, I want to share a little inspiration from a recent podcast interview that I listened to on Open Book with Jenna. In this episode, Jenna Bush-Hager interviewed best-selling author Kristin Hannah, and I'll link to that in the show notes. But you can always find Open Book with Jenna on any podcast source as well. Now, if you've read The Nightingale, The Women, or The Four Winds, you know that Kristin Hannah is masterful at weaving history and heart into her stories. But her path to becoming a writer wasn't a straight line, and that totally resonated with me. Now, I know this is a podcast for indie authors and publishers, and Kristin has been traditionally published, but from the writing standpoint, we can draw some really great inspiration. Like many of us, Kristin didn't start out as a writer. She actually went to law school. I went to nursing school and graduated with my degree and worked as a nurse. Michael Crichton, remember him? He went to medical school and never practiced medicine. Instead, he chose to write brilliant scientific and medical thrillers and produced a bunch of TV shows that were medical dramas. There are other people who I know who went to law school or medical school or were teachers or many different careers who became authors. The point is, lots of writers take winding paths to get their writing careers started. For Kristin, it was fairly early on in her journey. She had a season of bed rest during her pregnancy, and that gave her the space to focus on writing. She'd been dabbling in it a little bit, and eventually she did go back for a little bit to pursuing law, and then she eventually made the choice to stay home with her son during his early years. And she gave herself, I think she said in the interview, until he was in first grade. Like, I'll stay home that long, and whenever I have moments when he's napping or early in the morning before he's awake, I will write. So she devoted time to her craft whenever she had it. Now, fast forward, she's the author of 25 books. Her son is all grown now, and she writes about one book every 3 years now. But there was a point where she was writing several books a year. Here's what's key. Kristin spends an enormous amount of time researching each book. And so she has this commitment to this depth and richness in her stories. And as she's gotten a little bit older, she's changed her pace. So she's traveling more, she's learning, doing research while she's traveling. And so she's going at whatever pace she needs in life. And so for her, every 3 years is perfect. And I love that commitment because she's not taking a shortcut, but she's also not rushing herself. So she's traditionally published, like I said, but I found there were some powerful lessons that indie authors like us can learn from Kristin's journey. So I want to break down 3 takeaways that really stood out. And then I'll give you some practical ways that you can apply some of this to your own writing if you are an indie author and publisher. So the first thing I learned from Kristin Hannah was discipline in the craft. Kristin committed to the discipline of the work. So she wasn't rushing to crank out books just to say she published something. So in my last episode, I talked about AI. Kristin is not the kind of person who takes AI to make a shortcut version of a story. She focuses on crafting words well and creating rich stories with a lot of history and a lot of research. That's what makes them exceptionally meaningful. They're very thick books. I've done one on an audiobook. I've read one. They are not a quick afternoon beach read. These are really involved books. Now, as indie authors, we sometimes feel pressured to produce quickly. We're maybe thinking about the paycheck, or we're thinking we just need to have a goal of writing a certain number of books per year. And whether you're nonfiction or fiction, there is value in slowing down. in honing the craft, in delivering quality stories that resonate deeply. If it's nonfiction, same thing, in putting that time in to research things so that we're not just cranking out content, but being really intentional about it. The second thing I learned from Kristin Hannah is let success be a surprise. One thing that struck me was how surprised Kristin was by her success. She didn't expect bestseller lists or long lines at book signings. She wrote because she loved it and cared about the reader. And the accolades, those came later. She tells a story in the podcast about how it surprised her when she did see that first long line of people waiting to get books signed. And it just wasn't even something she was pursuing, never expected that would be her. It just wasn't part of the story. And then it became part of the story. And for indie authors, this is a good reminder. We can't control the bestseller lists or the viral moments. We might not even be looking for those, but we can control the heart we put into our work. And if the recognition comes, wonderful. If not, we're still creating something meaningful. So for me, it's the content that matters more than anything. It's not about how many followers I have, and it's not about how many people are standing in line or who really cares about my autograph. It's really about the content. The third thing I learned from Kristin was stay in it for the long haul. Kristin's first book was published in 1991, and since then, she's reinvented her writing multiple times. So she started with mass market romance, moved into women's fiction and historical sagas, and in the interview, she even talked about dreaming of writing fantasy someday. And if you've been in the writing world long enough, you know that there are these rules that you're supposed to stick with your genre and build that audience and not confuse them with writing something different. And I always love a good story of somebody who's gone about it in a different way and broken the rules and still achieved the success that they have. So Kristin's willingness to evolve and stick with it over the decades is an important mindset for indie authors. The indie landscape changes fast, but if we're willing to adapt and keep growing, there's no limit to what we can achieve. So maybe you started out doing one thing and it's not what's selling right now. Maybe you just need to look at what else you know, or what do you want to experiment with. So even though Kristin Hannah's publishing path looks very different from the indie route, her journey is full of lessons that we can apply. Discipline, passion, perseverance. That's what builds a sustainable writing career, whether you have a big publishing house behind you or you're doing it all yourself. So even though Kristin Hannah's publishing path looks very different from the indie route, let's talk a little bit about how you can apply some next steps related to discipline, passion, and perseverance. Loving the craft of writing is one thing, but if you're here listening to this podcast today, then you're also probably hoping to build a sustainable author business. So how do you do that without forcing it? Well, here's a couple of goals you can think about this week. Number one, audit one area of your craft. Pick one chapter, one scene, or even one blurb you've written recently and look at it through the lens of excellence. Is it clear? Is it engaging? Is it well crafted? This isn't about perfectionism, but it's about building the habit of revising with purpose and really putting in that time to do the research, very much inspired by the way Kristin researches and refines her stories. The second challenge I have for you is to reconnect with your ideal reader. Take 10 or 15 minutes this week to look at that profile. Do you have one you wrote about your ideal reader? If not, you can write one, but otherwise pull it out and review. Who are they? What do they love? What keeps them up at night? And now look at your current work in progress and see, have you been keeping this reader in mind as you write with heart and authenticity? Or have you been drifting into chasing trends or algorithms? I encourage you to come back to your ideal reader and just really target your reading for them. There was a story that Kristin told in the interview that also inspired me in that way, where when she was talking about the women, and this is a story of nurses in Vietnam, and she was talking about what she thought the story was about. And then when readers started telling her this was a story of friendship, it just made her pause and realize that, oh, there's a whole other aspect to this story that's hitting readers in a different way. And so that's why it's amazing when you get that feedback, because you get to know your readers more too. The third thing that you can do is to look at how you define success right now. I told you Kristin was surprised because she wasn't chasing bestseller lists. She was focused on the work. For indie authors, it's easy to get caught up in sales numbers because you are the marketing department. You are the one investing the money in the tools and the people that you need and whatever it is to get your books published. You're the one looking at all of that software. So you're wearing that business hat and you're also wearing the writer hat. And so you're not just thinking about the creative side of things. So how do you define success right now? Pause and ask yourself, what does it look for me in this season? Is it finishing a draft? Is it growing my email list? Is it publishing consistently? Define what it is for you and not for the market. What does it look like right now in your life? And then as you think about the long game, that mindset that we're thinking about being in it for the long term, ask yourself, am I thinking short term or long term? If you think about 1991 for Kristin publishing her first book, that was a long time ago for her now to have 25 books. And when you average that out and you see that it's been 34 years, you see that this is a long haul thing. This is diligent work and it is a commitment. And so for you, where are you at with that? Indie publishing can feel like a sprint because of all the tasks you need to get done. But this is a marathon. This is not just one book. Are your daily actions then building toward a career, the one that you want 5 years from now? Or is it just looking like a bunch of sprints? And this is where I'm encouraging you to just be intentional and think about the long haul. So that's your indie author blueprint for today. Focus on the work, care about your reader, build your business with intentional, sustainable steps. And then success may come in surprising ways, but your commitment to excellence and service will never be wasted. Thank you for hanging out with me today. If you found this helpful, I encourage you to share it with a fellow writer who's in it for the long haul, just like you. Until next time, keep writing, keep growing, and stay true to who you are as an author. If you're looking for those practical tips that I have and the materials I've put together for that small monthly fee, you'll find that at Indie Author Blueprint on Substack. I have all kinds of downloadable extra resources, more bonus podcast episodes, things like that, some tutorial videos. So I hope you take advantage of those as well, because I'm here to help you with your writing journey as an indie author publisher. All right, I'll see you next time.